goals, and it's time you reached them faster. You have dreams, and it's time you make them a reality. Massive life transformation starts now. It's Tampa Bay's performance power couple, certified coach and performance specialist Dana Medlin and certified coach and behavior analyst Michael Medlin. Get ready to transform your actions. It's time for the Action Hour.
Welcome to the Action Hour. I am your host, Dana Medlin, and I'm joined by my co-host and husband, Mr. Michael Medlin. How are you doing over there?
I'm doing so good. How are you, baby?
I'm feeling great, but I am feeling fired up about our show today because we are talking about labels. And honestly, I'm feeling ready to blast. Like, I seriously might get a little angry black woman on this particular topic.
Oh, let's calm down. Let's not go too far off the rails here.
I'm not going to go off the rails, but I do get heated on this issue because I see how destructive labels can be. Mm-hmm. You know, I see the detrimental effects that people who subscribe to labels end up dealing with. I mean, Michael, we see this in our coaching practice all the time, how the prison of a label can manifest and rob a person of living authentically and experiencing their true self. In my opinion, labels keep you feeling insecure and unhappy.
I mean, which is ironic because people constantly label themselves so they can fit into whatever category they're trying to, be in. I mean, we use labels in order to belong to specific groups, personality traits, sexuality, religion, nationality.
Indeed. So today we're going to talk all about labels. We're going to define some, and we're going to talk about specific effects. And of course, we've got some action steps to take to move beyond labels and identify your own value system. So first, let's talk about what the theory of labeling actually is. Mm-hmm. So the theory suggests that people obtain labels from how others view their tendencies or behavior, right? So this is what you were just saying. Mm-hmm. The problem is because we learn in societal interactions the way in which people will best receive us, we end up succumbing to that image to gain approval. We do these things to belong. So we end up altering our behavior and even our mannerisms. But the thing is, labels as a sociological theoretical study, it originally was just for the purpose of identifying the effects of labeling someone a deviant. If we label you a deviant, are you going to end up eventually exhibiting deviant behavior?
I have been called that many times. I mean, most of the time it's just because someone disagrees with my opinion or the way I live my life.
Exactly. Exactly. So it's not just the label itself that's harmful, but it's the definition that we attach to the label. Mm-hmm. We begin to live it, to become it, even when it's contradictory to who we are. For example, high school. Right? Oh, we've all been there, and everyone had a label. It was the geeks, the burnouts, the goth kids, the preppy kids, the jocks, the theater kids. All right, well, not all labels are harmful. I actually enjoyed being a theater kid. But consider the kid who got labeled a dumb jock and then never rose above it. And now, as an adult, he's got a complex regarding his intellect. He's a chronic underachiever, and he never reached his full potential. Now, consider further, let's say this dumb jock is now a 45-year-old man and doesn't even know that the label of dumb jock became his self-limiting belief. And so he can't figure out why he's stuck in a rut and can't get out. And it may not even occur to him that it was his high school experience that's the source or the ground zero of his current existential angst. I mean, does this sound like someone you know? Mm-hmm. Does it sound like it could be you?
I mean, we talked about this a few weeks ago, but I mean, my second week into my sophomore year of high school, it was my geometry teacher that, he told me that I would need to get used to wearing my name on my shirt because I wasn't going to amount to anything.
That's terrible.
I mean, my grades weren't great at that point. I admit that because, I was adjusting to my fourth school in many years. Mm-hmm. And I had to go into a very small Christian school. I'm talking like 100 people, grades, 1 through 12. And being at this large new school was, it was intimidating. I was massively underperforming for my skills. And, he decided that I was a loser because I wasn't turning in homework, and I fell asleep in class. I was actually sick. He changed the trajectory of my academic career because he told everyone in the class that I was a C student who was barely scraping by with D's in the academic classes because I took easy band classes and got A's and was able to keep my GPA up. He defined me and I lived down to that definition for the next year. I drove my GPA to a whopping 2.01.
That's ridiculous. It's terrible that most people don't consider the effects labeling can have. And it starts young, and it's most damaging to children. Giving a child a certain label can have a tremendous impact on their self-esteem. And children with self-esteem issues, inevitably become adults with self-esteem issues.
Very true. I mean, I had a master's degree and didn't feel enough. I mean, those words, 30 years later were still ringing in my head.
Okay, so one of my top 5 favorite movies of all time is Pretty Woman.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. So there's a scene in the movie where Julia Roberts, who plays Vivian, is laying in bed with Richard Gere, who plays Edward. Mm-hmm. And they've just engaged in some adult playtime, right? So now they're laying in bed having some after sex pillow talk, and Edward is asking Vivian how she ended up becoming a prostitute, and she's telling him her story. Now he says to her, "You could be so much more. I believe you have a lot of potential." And she says to him, "The bad stuff is easier to believe." Mm-hmm. That broke my heart because she had been labeled. She'd been labeled not smart, not worthy, and not going to amount to anything. And she believed in those labels, and they became her truth. Now, the beauty of that movie and why I love it so much is that he saw beyond her labels. He saw the real her and all that she could be, and it was just so beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, you and I have both lived that. I mean, we've both been told that we're less than what we really are, and rising above and seeing your true self it's so much harder and it's more work than to just go ahead and believe that bad stuff.
The fact is, being labeled and then later choosing to subscribe to a label, it can not only limit your potential, but it can blind you to its very existence and its crippling effects. So how do we break free? How do we identify that you may be subscribing to a label that doesn't suit your true self? Or worse, how do you know if you're subscribing to a label that's holding you back? Consider how often we see labels used and promoted in business.
All the time.
All the time, right? Personality tests that tell you you're a director or a dominant personality, translation. If you're a woman, it might be a B word, or, think about the ENFJ or INFT. Now, I'm not disparaging Myers-Briggs and the good that personality tests can do. It can help people relate and understand each other. But I think the harm comes in when you begin to limit yourself based on the parameters of that label. I'm a Taurus, so I must be bullheaded and stubborn, right? Well, I am, but that's not all that I am.
I mean, I'll jump on Myers-Briggs. I got no problem with that. I mean, they have substantial attempts to affirm its psychological validity. I mean, back in the day, it was called the U.S. Office of Strategic Services, which was, became the CIA. But they came up empty in trying to use it to seek the perfect intelligence agent. And the U.S. Educational Testing Service, they concluded that Myers-Briggs was without psychometric merit. I mean, based on established standards of psychological evaluation, Myers-Briggs, it doesn't cut it.
Wow.
The majority of people's scores land in 2 different zones.
Yep.
And if you score slightly more in one category than the other, then you're assigned a letter. And you don't 100% fit in that grouping.
I have a very friendly, outgoing personality, right? So people have labeled me as an extrovert. And for years, I was so confused by that label because I'm actually not. I'm just friendly and outgoing. But I enjoy alone time far more than I do like crowds and parties. But if I had answered that way on a lot of those personality tests in my 20s, I would have been passed over for sales positions because you can't be an introvert and be good at sales. Wrong. Right? Business owners and managers rely so heavily on these labels from personality tests that they think they know their employees. They place more value on these test results than in actually taking the time to get to know their people. So once again, we have to go charging in and give these employers the cliff notes. We actually get to know the individuals that work in an organization on a holistic level. We take a deep dive into understanding each unique person so we can understand what motivates them and how to reinforce them, what their passions are, what drives them. Because knowing this enables us to drive their behavior towards achieving the overall goals of a company. The intel is invaluable, and I'll tell you, it seldom matches the perceived label.
And you want to know why it hardly matches? Myers-Briggs, let's get into this. And I think many of you will be shocked, but many companies use this test, and it has, even been used by some therapists. Catherine Briggs was a housewife with no formal psychology training who didn't even go to college, and her daughter she wrote fiction. I mean, neither were trained in psychology at all. I mean, the man who they based their work upon was Carl Jung, who was famously quoted as saying, every person is an exception to the rule, and labeling people at first sight is nothing but a childish parlor game.
Wow. Oh, I love this topic. So when we come back, we're going to dive into the specifics of labels and give you some action steps to break free of the label prison. Then we're going to introduce our guest, Miss Christy Monson, who's a marriage and family therapist and author of Love, Hugs, and Hope. She'll be sharing her story and offering some interesting perspective. Then later on, we've got an all new Behave Yourself. So lots more to come. Stick around.
Turn heads this summer with the help of Medi Weight Loss. Lose up to 20 pounds the first month with a medically supervised weight loss program that's tailored to meet your specific needs. Their team of trained medical professionals will guide you, ensuring that you lose the weight and keep it off. Get started today. Call 877-MED-LOSS and book your free assessment. That's 877-MED-LOSS. Locations Tampa, Brandon, and Luce. On average, patients on individualized restricted calorie program lose 6.4 pounds the first week and 14 pounds the first month. Medical supervision required.
Welcome back to the Action Hour. Before the break, we were talking about how destructive labels can be, and yet they're so prevalent in our society. Like, wouldn't it be great to live in a world free from labels, where each individual felt the freedom of being their true and unique self? Yeah, that would be amazing. So where do we begin? How do we break the cycle of labeling and its negative effects? First of all, from a behavioral standpoint, I think we need to focus on what is within our control. And one of those actions is to stop labeling other people. It's the age-old adage of do unto others. I think at times we get so caught up in the rat race of our society that we forget to go back to the simple fundamentals of being a good person. I think by taking a few moments to imagine how being labeled by others would affect your life, it's a great way to understand the impact your own labels could have on someone else. Just think about how being labeled would affect you. And then whenever you notice yourself inappropriately labeling someone, try to think about how you would feel if they did the same to you. Because if you can remain conscious and aware of how harmful being labeled can be, you may find it easier to avoid labeling someone else in the future. Like, imagine if a coworker labeled you as being angry and treated you differently because of it. Meanwhile, all that happened is you just got out of rush hour traffic on 275.
Hey, I'm annoyed about 275. I've been off it for over an hour.
Exactly. But consider how you would feel maybe if someone labeled you as a liar, even though you're not one, right? What effect would that have on your business? And worse yet, your reputation?
I mean, think about racism. I mean, sexism. Most of all the group think that we do. I mean, societal implications, they're huge because it's all based on assigning a label to a group. There's this race to identify, to categorize in order to make, someone feel, a certain way or, feel safe. If we limit and we place people in a box, then we don't have to really do any work. I mean, we can be very superficial without, having to be real humans. Overwhelmingly, I swear, I think most categorizations they're driven by laziness. That's
so true. I mean, we don't want to know how to relate to you. We don't know how to relate to you on site, so we need to put you in a box so we're not uncomfortable. I've got a better idea, though. How about obtaining a better understanding of others? Even though it may seem convenient to apply a label to someone else, those labels aren't of any real substantive use. If you consider the fact that you probably aren't going to know the full story behind someone else's life, so any label you apply is going to be an inaccurate representation of the person's personality. So why bother applying the label in the first place? It's not going to be a realistic understanding of them. So instead, get to know a person so that you can more accurately understand them as an individual. And learning more about someone is going to make it a lot more difficult to go inventing, harmful labels or stories about them.
That's so true. I mean, how many times have we worked with employers? They bring us in to build teams, and when we ask them, what they're looking for, they always rattle off, this long list of labels, that they believe work best in their industry. It's like you said earlier, most believe you can be an extrovert in order to be a good salesperson. The truth is introverts actually make great salespeople.
Yeah, they do.
And they can sell better to other introverts. adapting your style to include, other styles, it only strengthens the entire team.
Absolutely.
You have to be open to the differences. There's this massive, massive strength in us, not being the same, but you have to get to know your employees.
I couldn't agree more. We have to tell this to employers all the time. You think you know your employees, but we can tell you you're wrong, because unless you've taken a deep dive into their lives, which most employers don't want to touch because of HR and legal issues, you can't possibly know a person.
And the way to really, to start it out is to focus on what you have in common with others.
Definitely.
It's very easy to look at others and see what separates them from yourself. However, focusing on what you have in common with others, it can go a long way in cutting down on the number of, labels you apply to them. Always remember, yourself of the similarities you share with others, not the differences. And at the end of the day, we're all people, with similar wants and needs. Every person has a family, goals, aspirations, and challenges very similar to you.
Precisely. And if you seek to understand, you'll be able to consider why someone might act the way that they do. Now, you're not going to always know why someone is behaving in a certain manner, and it can be misleading and possibly harmful to just apply a label to someone if you don't fully understand the reasons behind their actions. For example, have you ever been in a situation where you meet someone for the first time and, they act really short, that person, right? And you may be tempted to label them as distant or grumpy or, again, even the B word. But what you may not know is that person just had their car towed. And under normal circumstances, they're probably very pleasant. But again, they just had their car towed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Who's not going to be a little grumpy? Or maybe you have one of those neighbors who ignores you when you say hello in the morning and you think that they're just being rude and unneighborly. What if you later find out that they have a hearing problem and they just simply didn't hear you?
It reminds me of a story when I first started to teach. We had this kid who wouldn't let anyone touch him. He not even a finger on his shoulder. He never smiled. He never really talked. He just seemed to hate all the guards. Well, I forgot to mention, my first teaching position was in a maximum security jail for violent offenders. That's why there's guards there. So this kid had done some stuff to definitely be there. I mean, he wasn't innocent, but all the teachers in the break room, they would say, oh, he's an a-hole. And, his psychological profile said that he was an introvert with oppositional defiance disorder.
Oh, wow.
It took me 6 months to finally get this kid to start talking to me. And over many, many more months, I came to find out he had a stepfather who actually used to pin him down and extinguish cigars on his chest.
Oh, my goodness.
I mean, the nipple on his left side had actually become deformed and non-existent from multiple cigar burns.
Oh, my God.
He had been beaten at age 11 so badly that his liver was lacerated. The kid wasn't an introvert. He dreamed at one point of being a singer. He wrote amazing poetry. He used to rap and beat on the desk. But he didn't trust anybody, and the thought of physical touch was terrifying. He wasn't oppositionally defiant. He was abused.
Oh my goodness.
And so, though long ago he had, all these labels were placed upon him. And when we look back through his file, we found out that his behavior issues started after a bad encounter with a psychologist, and who had decided he had all these labels. I mean, he was branded, and by God, he lived down to the branding.
Oh my God. This is exactly why I get fired up. Labels are so destructive. And so I'm just going to be blunt right here. If you feel the need to constantly label other people, then you need to check yourself. What do I mean by that? I mean, gain a more accurate view of yourself.
What's your motivation for labeling?
Yeah, if you're someone who feels like it's always someone else who is the troublemaker or the problem, then understand that it's going to leave you feeling resentful and powerless. And when people are left feeling powerless and resentful, they eventually lash out. And then you're going to miss the areas in which you could actually improve your situation or yourself. So avoid blaming others when something goes wrong in your life. Remember that if you've made a mistake, the easiest way to deal with that is to accept responsibility for it. A lot of times a person who always thinks his problems are because of someone else, they say, everyone else is too sensitive or they're all jerks. They're just failing to take responsibility for their own challenges and failing to recognize areas where there may be some growth opportunities and some room for improvement. So keep an accurate view of your own actions and your attitude, because that will help you better understand others, and it's going to enable you to stop assigning labels to them.
And this can be, a great strategy for relationships too. I mean, we tend to assign labels to people's actions or their words, and instead of listening to what people say, we assign motivation to it.
Yeah.
And if you go into a conversation without expectation, without labels, and just listen for what is said and ask clarifying questions, we can shift the conversation toward being so much more productive. we teach, that small group class on communication. And it's one of my favorite things to do all week. And helping people lose the need for labels makes a dramatic change in the way they interact with the world, and it strengthens connections with those, that we really love. Mm-hmm. You mentioned checking yourself and seeing that the labels you place may actually be hurting you. Mm-hmm. I mean, think about how many times we have to, we've labeled our spouses. We had that one client whose husband had tried to help wash the dishes.
Yeah.
He didn't do it just the way that she wanted it done. And so she labeled him. She said, he's just not good at dishwashing. So two things happened. One, the husband's motivation to help was diminished because, he was admonished for not doing a good enough job. And two, she felt like she had to do all the work and ended up being secretly resentful of her husband for not helping. Mm-hmm. That labels actually made her have to do more work. It demoralized him, and it ended up, causing all this resentment.
Yeah.
Instead, by using, the good communication techniques that we taught, she could have helped him understand why she does things a certain way, and he could have continued to help because he wanted to. He wanted to be a better husband, but he didn't want to be scolded. In behavior, we call that avoidance, and so she had trained him. She had trained him to do nothing in order to not be admonished.
And I remember that couple, and I love that little group that we coach. And one of our most effective behavior change techniques we've used with them was to have each individual member of the group ask themselves, does it serve or does it subvert? And as it relates to the topic of labels, it's helped them to remember that a person is more than an assigned label. Listen, human behavior is so complex, and a simple label isn't going to capture the entire personality of an individual. When you meet someone, people that we meet, they're people first.
Yeah, I mean, I used to work with people with schizophrenia, and they're labeled mentally ill. Well, he has an illness, but he's more than the illness. He deserves the same respect as anyone else. I mean, people in wheelchairs aren't disabled. They're persons with a disability.
Absolutely. So, and believe it or not, this is a very popular area in which people need help. Mm-hmm. Blaming behavior, labeling behavior, these are habits, and it can be really difficult to notice when you're engaged in this unwanted behavior if you're newly trying to end the habit, right? So reach out to friends and ask for help. Ask the people closest to you to help you notice when you're engaging in labeling behavior. Try working together with your friends to help each other stop labeling other people, because believe me, there are some really typical labels or preconceived notions that you might have without even realizing it. For example, gender labels. Oh, she's emotional because she's a woman, or she's a bad driver because she's a woman, right? Sound familiar? Yeah. Age labels. He's an old man, so he's probably racist, right? Or he's just senile. I've actually heard these things.
Yes.
Labels based on race or nationality. She's Asian, so she's probably a terrible driver, and so on. Did these sound familiar? I hate those. So if you'd prefer to seek out a professional, we just so happen to be experts in behavior change, so feel free to reach out to us.
And I mean, this is why I hate the rumor mill. I tell people to stay away from the cooler because it's one of the worst places in business, and we see it within all sorts of different schools and communities. I mean, most of, rumors are they're worse than, spreading to just that label. I mean, most of which really haven't been examined. I mean, once someone's labeled, now they're stuck with it.
Exactly.
Not all labels are bad, though. They can still be limiting. I was called analytical, an analytical numbers guy who can be, really a straight shooter and blunt. Little did most people know, I'm artistic, I'm creative, I'm a great listener. I had people not invite me to events because they just assumed an analytical numbers guy wouldn't enjoy it.
And for business owners, I mean, they invest so much into their staff, but then I see them miss opportunities to advance their people because the boss has a limiting belief in their head about the employee.
I mean, how about instead of seeing that, for example, this person cannot lead because they aren't a leader or a go-getter, instead do a functional yearly assessment. And within that yearly assessment, you ask what their desires are. And if becoming a leader in the company is what they're looking for, then identify skills you need in order to become what you need.
Absolutely. So for more on this topic or to schedule a consultation, reach us at info@actionstransform.com or visit actionstransform.com. When we come back, we've got therapist and author Christy Monson. Looking to tone, tighten, or enhance your body while still retaining a natural appearance? Then look no further than Dr. Pedro Solar. Dr. Solar uses a customized approach to cosmetic and reconstructive procedures to the face, body, and breast. Call or go online now to receive $500 off any cosmetic surgery. 813-878-9889. That's 813-878-9889. Reclaim your confidence and discover a new you. Welcome back to the happy hour. Welcome back to the action hour. We have a little too much fun in here sometimes. All right. Our guest today is a retired marriage and family therapist. She now dedicates her time sharing the valiant efforts that her clients have made to improve their lives and to enjoy a better quality of life. She's the author of Becoming Free and Love, Hugs, and Hope. Please welcome Miss Christy Monson. Hello, Christy. How are you?
I am great. How are you, Dana?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Most definitely.
You know, Christy, you were a really successful therapist, and at age 65, it says that you started a whole new career and journey. I mean, I can relate to this because I was a therapist until a few years ago, and have now started into the coaching field. Can you share with us how that all came about? What was your journey?
Well, I loved working in Las Vegas. I had a large practice there, and I had several interns working under me, and I loved it. And then when it was time for me to retire, I'm kind of like a Patty's flea. I just have to be out doing things all the time. and I was so, I guess, in awe of my clients and how they had worked so hard to heal themselves that I wanted to share their stories with other people. So I decided I would write about them. So my first book, Becoming Free, is a story about many of my clients, which I just had to share with the world because it was a tribute to them and the hard work that they had done. And then the small publisher that I found asked me after the Sandy Hook incident if I would write a book for children. And so I wrote Love, Hugs, and Hope When Scary Things Happen. And it just did very well. It's a book that kind of opens up communication between parents and kids when scary things happen. And it may not be something as terrible as Sandy Hook, but divorce or death or even the death of a goldfish might be something that a kid's going to think is something. So anyway, I published that, and after I did that, I was just hooked on writing, and so I've just kept writing ever since.
Well, that is fabulous. And what an amazing book that is. And to be able to emote to children after such a devastating national tragedy, I mean, kudos to you for sure. Christy, along your journey, you had a very significant failure with one of your books, Banished. I loved the story of how that book came about and was hoping that you wouldn't mind sharing that with our listeners.
You know, I would love to. And it was devastating at the time.
Yeah.
But of course, now I can look back on it and it's a little bit better. I had a couple of clients that were Native Americans, and they were just kind of becoming juvenile delinquents. And they have that culture is so rich and has so much heritage. And I wanted these boys to connect with their past. And so I asked each of them if they would write a story. They were Hopis, and I asked if they would write a story about their ancestors. And so they did. But they said to me, well, why don't you write a story too? So I thought, I love this culture. I'm going to write one too.
There you go.
And long after they had finished their therapy and really had turned their lives around, here I was with this little Hopi Indian kid running around in my head. And so I finished his story, and it really did very well. It won a Western Arts Council Award. And then I got a Utah Arts Council Award for it also. So it won a couple $1,000. And I thought, oh, good, I'm going to get this published. Well, not.
No.
Because of course I'm not a Native American. I'm an old white person that does not have any.
Speaking of labels, right?
I have European ethnicity, I guess I'll
there
say.
We go.
Northern European. Anyway, so I could not get it published because I was not Native American, and they didn't look at me as an expert, even though I'd done an awfully lot of research. So I did self-publish it, and it's still out there. I use it. It's on Amazon. I once in a while will do a class visit or something, but but anyway, it was my first fiction, and I just was devastated. But you recover, you pick yourself up and go on, and things like that happen.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the tenets that we share with our clients is, bad things are going to happen, but it's how you weather them and the action steps that you take to recover. And speaking of which, Christy, as coaches, we help our clients to practice self-care and improve work-life balance and manage their stress. So what advice can you give as a retired therapist to overcome anxiety in someone's life?
Well, there's a couple of things that I think are important. I listened to I learned a little bit about you guys, and you are wonderful. It sounds like you have had very good success with what you have done.
Thank you.
Sometimes people really can't get it together because of something that has happened in the past, and they may have a tragic event or a trauma that's happened. And this last book that I put out called Finding Peace in Times of Tragedy deals with people that have suffered some significant tragedies in their lives. It kind of goes along with Love, Hugs, and Hope for children, except this one is for adults. And sometimes people get frozen back at that time, and they just can't walk beyond it. But I do believe that through meditation, if you do your deep breathing and mindfulness in the moment, and then establish a creative visualization, I love for people to find a safe place inside their head to imagine, just kind of in a daydreaming way, a safe place. And it might be at the beach or with the ocean waves crashing, or in the forest, or wherever they would like it to be. And then to go along with that, I think, at least from the clients that I've worked with, if you find an internal guide, and this internal guide can be anybody that you want it to be. Some of my abuse survivors had a tree that was their internal guide because they just didn't trust another person.
Yeah.
So your internal guide can be anybody that you want. But I do believe that as you talk over what your problems are, that the healing is inside of you. And you can establish your own mantras and help to really help work beyond the anxiety and the stress or the depression or whatever you feel. Now, I'm not saying that you don't sometimes need some outside help, because you do, but I do feel like if we can connect with the inner part of ourselves, we have the capacity to heal that is innately wonderful, that I think sometimes we don't tap into.
I could not agree more, Christy. Thank you for that.
I mean, I love that answer, because we do so much work with nonprofits, and we really believe in trying to put more good into the world. And you're speaking of mantras. I mean, one of this next question, it really comes from one of our own personal mantras, and it's one that we ask every guest. But what good are you currently putting out into the world?
Well, I love giving service. It's just one of my favorite things to do. And I know you talk about aha moments, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But my aha moments are not great big. They're just little. And like I do post-traumatic stress groups here in the city, and I have worked with AmeriCorps with young kids in the reading programs and things like that. But like yesterday, I had there's an older gentleman in one of my male post-traumatic stress groups that was abused from the time he was 6 years old in an orphanage until he was a teenager and ran away. And he just looks at himself as a victim of the world, and he's got heart troubles now, and so he's afraid he's dying. And I just said to him, rather than just wait to die, let's work on your bucket list. And even if you can't do some travel the world or whatever, well, you can still do your bucket list through books and movies and videos or whatever. And
go there in your mind.
Yeah. There you go. Perfect. And so we turned it around. And he had an aha moment yesterday because he realized that he could begin to focus on some of those things than just waiting to find the test results of his heart and maybe he was going to die or whatever. So I think we can have significant influence on people's lives, and I love when my clients have aha moments, because then they become aha moments for me.
I completely understand. It's people ask us why we became coaches and why we do what we do, and I tell people all the time it's because I'm selfish. I mean, nothing makes me feel the way that coaching and helping people through these hard situations. It makes me feel amazing, and I actually do it for the way it makes me feel. It's selfish,
really is.
but
It's selfish of us, but we love the feeling of just making other people feel good and whole, and it's I say this all the time at the end of the show. This feels like therapy for me because I expand as a person and as a soul through the journeys of others. So, Christy, where can our listeners find you and where can they purchase your books?
I'm on the web at ChristyMonson.com, and then my books are on Amazon so that they can find them there. But I just wanted to say that I totally agree with you. I've been working with writing a 50 Heroes for Boys book. And so we've gotten into the lives of Jackie Robinson and, people like that are first and that are really heroes to me. And I have loved doing that. It's been selfish for me because every time it is expansive when you hear the story of somebody that really has changed the world. And I think, great, that's awesome. And then that gives me courage to maybe go out there and change my little part of the world too.
I love that. Find more at Christy Monson, MONSON.com. Thank you so much for being here today, Christy. When we come back from the break, we've got an all-new Behave Yourself, so we'll be right back. I think we can all admit that adulting can be hard, but don't let stress and personal difficulties keep you from living your best life. At Actions Transform, our behavior coaches can teach you to break unhealthy habits and give you the tools you need to achieve your personal and professional goals. You have everything to gain. Call Actions Transform today at 813-444-2282 or visit us at actionstransform.com. Remember, dreams inspire, but actions transform. Welcome back to the Action Hour. It is time for our favorite segment, Behave Yourself, where we take letters and messages from our listeners and we read them on the air and we give some coaching right here, right now. So this week's message reads like this. Dear Dana and Michael, first of all, let me just tell you that your show is giving me life. You two make me feel like there's hope even for someone like me. Here's my issue. I'm gay and I still haven't told my parents. I know it's like 2019 and I'm the only one still in the closet. What's worse is that now I'm in my 30s and because I'm constantly having to live a lie, I'm struggling with self-identity. I don't know who I'm becoming because I can't be who I really am. I feel trapped in a life I don't want to live. I love my family, but they are super religious, and I know they'll disown me if they knew who I really was. I won't name the religion out of respect, but suffice to say, it's kind of a cult. How can I develop if I can't be me? Signed, John. And John's not his real name. He said we could read his letter if we didn't use his real name. So, John, I know you're listening right now because you just texted me. But last week, we touched on the importance of having support structures in place. And you are a perfect example of why that's so important. Having come from super religious families ourselves, believe me when I tell you, Michael and I, we get it. Yeah. Babe, let's help John. I mean, can we adopt him?
We're not adopting someone in their 30s.
Then what can we do?
Hey, John, thanks for the email. It's funny that you say you're the only one left in the closet. The truth is we have several clients that we've helped through, this process. Yep. And first and foremost, I want you to know that this is a process. It's unique to each person. There isn't a single answer. So I'm going to throw multiple things at you and just, take what works for you. You mentioned that you believe that your parents will not support you and they may disown you. I hope that this isn't true and that you're just underestimating them, but you know them best. So I'm not really going to question that. The first thing that we have to look at is the practical. You need at this time to, take a look at your life in its entirety. If the worst case scenario does play out and you are not welcome in their life anymore, who's going to support you? What's your support structure? If you live with them, where will you live? Do you have enough money and savings to make it on your own? Will you still have access to your items? I mean, your furniture, clothing, personal items. Consider that they may surprise you and be supportive.
Yeah.
I mean, the way you tell someone will influence, by your anticipated reaction. So go into this with an open heart and hope for the best outcome. When you tell people, give them the benefit of the doubt. I want to make certain that you have an emotional support structure in place too. I mean, do you have friends who are aware that you are gay? Do you have people in your life that will support you emotionally? This is a time where you may have extreme highs and possible lows. So, this can really go in multiple directions with varied responses. So have that support in place.
Definitely.
You're taking this, this huge, amazing step to live your life authentically, which is, it's critical to overall happiness and a well-balanced life. But I will say that some people we have worked with have chosen to either live closeted, out, or partially out. We had one client who made the personal choice to be out to most people, but decided that, being authentic with his grandmother wasn't, worth the possible, outcome. So it's completely your choice. I tend to push for authenticity, but you tell, and then it's your choice, must be decided on, kind of a case by case basis. Who you choose to tell may end up changing as you get more comfortable. So with all that said, once you've identified what your support structure will be and you're hoping for the best, but you plan for the worst, then we can get into what you want to accomplish with this decision. You mentioned struggle with self-identity. So when you say that, what does that mean to you? What are your limits right now? Make a list of what you want to be able to do, that you feel that you really can't do now. And then begin to look at who this will affect and how it may affect you. This is going to prepare you to handle each situation. In this day and age, it shouldn't affect employment, but if you are self-employed, unfortunately, it can affect your business.
Yeah, we've seen that.
It's sad but true. And as much as I want it to not be, it's important to consider. I mentioned this because of planning. As we take all these things into consideration, we can make action plans on when to tell whom. If you're certain your parents won't support you, and if you need access, to your items and your personal effects, then I would make certain you have everything lined up to be independent before letting them know. If you feel like it may affect your business or employment, then I would make an action plan to be able to handle that. I highly suggest during this time to, really invest in yourself. Self-care is going to be really critical, for a high stress situation. And this may be a huge change for you that will, make you feel authentic, happy, and free, but it can also come with unwanted aspects, and putting that plan together for like a friend or a coach to check in on you, it's going to be really important. Take time into consideration that this does not need to be an all or nothing event. Timing is completely under your control. Coming out can be done in stages. Listen to your gut, analyze your life. How much of you do you want to share with others? And we've had some clients who came out to their family, then friends, and then finally at work. Some did the exact opposite, and where they did friends first and work, and then came out to family. If you want to test the waters in one environment first and then wait, that's fine. Be prepared for, the people, one of my friends calls it gay fatigue, where, the people in your life will be a bit awkward about proving acceptance and want to talk about it all the time. To you, you've always been a gay man, but, to them, you're recently gay. And don't be afraid to tell them that, nothing's really changed, and that you may or may not want to answer questions, or, that maybe you wanted to talk about something else. You're still just John, who just so happens to be gay.
Speaking of labels.
Yeah. Realize that you have always been gay, but it's new to other people. So what you interpret as possibly being rejection, it may just be shock because they thought they knew you and are learning something new. I really recommend journaling through the process, being able to look back, reflect on the journey. And if you're in a relationship with someone, of course, let them know, since this may affect you, them also. We don't recommend, immediately going out and starting to date heavily. Again, it's, a choice where you need to find who you are as an individual first and then add someone else in. I hope this helps. And if you ever need to chat or just grab a cup of coffee, give me a call. I'm always looking for more friends.
We are always looking for more friends. And John, if we could adopt you, I would. Please stay in touch with us and let us know how we've helped and if there's anything else we can do. For more information on performance and behavior coaching, visit us online at actionstransform.com. And if you or someone you know needs help getting unstuck or identifying limiting beliefs or mental blocks, please reach out to us at info@actionstransform.com or call us at 813-444-2282. Be sure to like us on Facebook at The Action Hour and at Actions Transform. You can catch up on all of our shows by subscribing to our YouTube channel, Actions Transform. Special thanks to our sponsors, Medi Weight Loss. Visit MediWeightLoss.com to learn more about their medically supervised weight loss program. And Dr. Pedro Solar, board-certified cosmetic and reconstructive surgeon. This month, Dr. Solar is offering $500 off any cosmetic surgery, and you can take advantage of that through the month of August. Visit our nonprofit partner of the month, oldsmarcares.org, to learn what you can do to make a difference today. If you'd like to submit coaching questions for us to read on the air during Behave Yourself, send us a message on Facebook at The Action Hour or email us at info@actionstransform.com. All right, that's going to do it. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I'm Dana Medlin.
And I'm Michael Medlin, reminding you that dreams inspire, but actions transform.